Some days I think I live my entire life in a bubble because every day I walk to my college campus and I move around the campus all day, and it's kind of its own contained community. There are my faculty colleagues, there's the staff and the administrators, there are the students, and we are our own kind of world. We're our own little bubble inside the larger community of the city where the college is located. But other times I think, no, it's not. It's a microcosm. And a lot of what goes on is reenacting on a smaller scale the same dynamics that I see or would see if I spent my days off campus. There's one student I had in class last spring. Very, just tons of potential, very powerful. The gifts that this student has are just overwhelming. But the student is also very temperamental, very moody, has a reputation for being very difficult, did some really remarkable work sometimes in the class, but other times just failed to show up or was completely unprepared. And I did what I do. I stuck to my deadlines, applied them consistently so that I was being fair to this student and measuring behavior by the same standards I apply to everybody else. And for a while that seemed okay, and then at some random moment, not tied to any event that I'm aware of, the student suddenly just shut me off, froze me out, and I've been shunned ever since. And if I pass the student anywhere on campus, the student won't even make eye contact. So I mentioned this. I don't lose sleep over it. That's something that people are free to do if they want to do it. I think it's a little bit childish. It's not the kind of behavior that I like to think that I would impose on anybody else. But I mentioned it to the student's advisor, to the faculty member in the student's major, only to find out that the student had changed major and that the former advisor was now getting the exact same silent treatment. And I go through all of that just to say, I think there are people in the world who run on grievance. I think the watch spring that makes their clockwork run is who do they resent? And they have to fan the resentments the same way you have to wind a clock. And I think they're afraid that if they run out of enemies, if they run out of injustices that they nurse to themselves, if they run out of those, then they're afraid there won't be anything fueling their life anymore, anything that makes them feel motivated. They're motivated by opposing the people they oppose. And when I think of it that way, it does help me have some compassion, because that must be a really awful way to live. You go far enough back in the United States, and there was a time when when going to school at all was something that was only available to people who had sort of a threshold level of affluence. And if you were below that income level, you just didn't go to school. You just did whatever your family did to try to survive. It's the same thing that happens today in a whole lot of developing countries. You grow up in a family, and, in some other developing countries, you might grow up as a street child, and you do through the day exactly what you have to do to eat, to find some shelter, and to take care of the other immediate threats to your survival. But then there were families that had some resources and could send their children to school. This is, of course, before there was compulsory education. At the point where education became compulsory, then it was offered through public schools for free, and there was the expectation that your children show up and not be truant up until whatever the age was. I want to say 14 or 15. I think it probably varies from state to state. This is before, of course, the homeschooling revolution takes off, which I believe happened probably in the 1990s. But still, the expectation is that the kids get some kind of school. They go to a public or private school, or you homeschool your child and the state somehow keeps tabs on what it is that you're delivering to the child. Back then, when schooling was something where access was not wide open and universal, College, even more so. I mean, if you were to find out today that someone had a PhD in quantum physics and also a postdoc that was funded by a grant, you might think, whoa, I am looking at someone who is an academic giant. I am looking at someone who's completely off the scale that I occupied. There was a time when college was important and available to so few people that if you met someone who was college educated, it might have that same effect on you. But somewhere along the line, driven in part by, after World War II, the GI Bill, and the GI Bill sent a wave of people to college because suddenly it was funded, and also people moving off the farm into the city, but industrial production changing to where working in a factory was no longer a really dependable, secure way of providing a good living and raising a family. As those forces converged, as we moved from manufacturing to more of an information and service economy, more and more people showed up to college. And I came to that late. I mean, I didn't first walk into a college classroom as the teacher until the mid-1990s. And we were well into the period where the expectation was that anyone who wanted a good standard of living needed to go to college. And anyone who chose a career path that did not include college had sold themselves short. Now, that's an irrational belief, but that is, today, by and large, the prevailing belief, although I get the sense that more and more people are challenging that. But as that became the prevailing belief, in came a flood of students. And this flood of students, their level of preparation, the resources that they could draw upon as far as their past training, their talents, their family, any of those that enabled them to succeed, those were very, very uneven. So, of course, college faculty all bellyache to one another about college is not for everybody. They expect me to educate all of these students who are in no way prepared for college. They expect me to teach writing skills that should have been addressed and sealed up in about third grade. And now here someone is a junior in college unable to carry out these tasks, and I'm expected to rewind and teach them these basics because we accept everybody. From that bellyaching, what we settle into a large part of the time is we set out the expectations that we think are reasonable, and then we see some of our students step forward, identify themselves as people who need help, and we'll work with them. And other students not step forward, and some of the ones who step forward, who don't step forward and say they need any help, they already have it under control. Either they are capable enough students that they can navigate the whole challenge themselves, or, and it's the people who come after the or, that I make some real simple attributions about. I tell myself that they are immature, and therefore their top priority is social success. They have all these opportunities to go and do enjoyable, exciting things with their friends, and they've soaked up too many messages from TV, film, and also just from each other that college is something you can put off until the last minute and you can slide by with a C, and nothing is really different in the end. And then they discover that playing fast and loose like that means that you can fail classes that way. And even if you don't, even if you do manage to salvage it at the end, you get to the end of your college education and you need things like recommendations. And then, to your surprise, you find out that you actually do need mastery of, full grasp of the subject matter that you studied. But you played so many games and you cut so many corners that you can't explain even basic concepts. And this is not the way the TV show was supposed to turn out. It's not the happy ending of the movie where you get the job and all of a sudden you're affluent. You're in a job and you're in over your head and you can't move up because you wasted your college years. I observe the students who don't identify themselves as needing help, but they also don't do what's necessary to succeed. And after a while, year in, year out, I put my attention on the ones who do well and on the ones who step forward and ask for help. And the ones who don't become kind of a faceless mass. They become almost, the roughage, the fiber, the byproduct of higher education. And I came to this realization that I think I talked about a number of weeks back, but I came to this realization when I was teaching in our adult program, when I was teaching an online class. A lot of these behaviors, they're not immaturity. They are the behavior of people who are overwhelmed. They are the behavior of people who are stuck, and they are frozen, and they believe that there are consequences to identifying themselves. They may not even be able to put those consequences into words. But when I start up every class, proceed through every class, and I have these expectations that they are not in a position to meet, that negative experience repeated again and again over time, it breeds a problem. It creates kind of a wound, and that wound gets rubbed and made raw and irritated over and over again. Meanwhile, I keep showing up to work, living in a mythical reality where immature students, if you give them enough setbacks, they get tired of living within those setbacks and they change their work habits, and in the end, everything is all right. And my own reality is just as mythical as the reality of people who've watched too many TV shows and movies and think that they can slide by with C's and all of a sudden have a good job and make a lot of money. In my reality, I just got to give them a little tough love, and then I just have to wait. Now, I'm saying all of this, and I started off today talking about college being a microcosm because I think that is what a lot of officials did in the years leading up to the election of 2016. I think that there are a lot of people who did not fit with what the opinion leaders, maybe opinion leaders isn't the word I want, but the people who were making their way through the marketplace of ideas, their ideas were being accepted. They were winning the argument and winning the discussion and winding up on top. They were winning elections for a very long time. And what they didn't see is that they weren't doing it with a consensus. They were doing it with a message that persuaded a critical mass of voters, but that critical mass kept getting thinner and thinner. And there was this big, big segment of the population who could not thrive inside the narrative of the leadership. And the leadership said, within the narrative, there are people who will thrive, and then there are other people who are poorly suited to it, but they'll identify themselves and they'll say that they're struggling, and then we'll go to work, and we'll try to incorporate them and integrate them, and we'll create services that'll help, and we will have difficult conversations with them and reach some kind of shared understanding, and we'll educate them and they'll educate us. But there were many who weren't identifying themselves. They just felt more alienated and more marginalized. And what we ultimately lost sight of was there were so many of them, and elections are effectively just a nose count, that at some point, that group of people, they would be numerous enough that they would tip the balance of power in the country. I don't think I've ever reached a point in the years that I have been an educator that I have had so many students stumble badly and continue stumbling badly and not be retained, that they were outstripping the ones who were succeeding. I don't think that's ever happened. But what worries me is I wouldn't be in a position to know, because I long since got out of the habit of paying attention to the ones who just seem to opt out. I don't know how to get inside their heads. It takes just about all the energy I've got to reach the students I'm currently reaching, to reach the prepared students who want to be challenged, to reach the struggling students who will ask for help, because that's exhausting as well. So then playing detective or playing Annie Sullivan with the students who aren't succeeding but won't speak up, I don't know, I feel kind of defeated by that. We have talked on college campuses for a number of years about the problem of retention, because all across the country, most colleges lose a huge segment of the freshman class that arrives every fall. Now, part of that can probably be attributed to some deep dysfunctions in the public school system, and also in private schools, and also in homeschooling. In K through 12 education, as it is currently understood in the United States, there are some habits, there are some cultural ingrowings that really, really don't serve anyone, aren't the slightest bit functional. And the dysfunctions that they breed, when students get to college and they wash out because they feel completely overwhelmed, that's a problem that nobody in higher education has ever been able to figure out the big solution, the big magic bullet that can make a difference. Instead, it's a battle we try to fight every year, one student at a time. Now, the nice thing is, because I am on such a small campus, we can catch individual students that we're concerned about, and we have a lot of ways that we talk with one another informally about, here's a student who I think is starting to slip through the cracks. Let's see what we can do. And I don't know, maybe we need to get back to the point where local community is so much the basic building block of how we think about public life that we do actually notice our neighbors. I mean, when I started paying attention to the students who were succeeding and or the students who were identifying themselves, it feels to me almost a little bit like the way so many people who have what it takes to succeed in politics, whether because they can be the voice of reason in the room, which is how Barack Obama marketed himself and moved up so rapidly, or because they have celebrity. Everyone immediately says, well, if they're that big of a talent, they should run for president. And Molly Ivins used to make this argument, and I miss Molly Ivins. But she used to say, if you've got that much to offer, start with your city council. Start with your school board. If we had a powerful foundation of civic-minded, wise leaders down at the neighborhood level, and if people thought local government was important, that local government was where things really got done, then we wouldn't have so many people slipping through the cracks. Here I am at a small school, and we try to do retention one student at a time instead of just rolling out campus-wide initiatives. Now, I'm just imagining that the larger campuses, if that's what they do, I think they probably go down to their individual academic units and try to encourage all of them to take care of the students who are on their rosters. But so many students on a big campus can be undecided, undeclared, and therefore not really connect with anybody. I think we have a lot of voters today that don't really connect with anybody. So on this particular Monday of this particular week, I am not feeling like I'm in a bubble. I'm feeling like I'm in a petri dish. I know that the academic world is in many ways insulated from the forces and the stressors that happen in the community off campus. But I do see, both in how I have thought about the different profiles of my students, and in how certain students, like the one I started off today talking about, they keep themselves going, even if they keep themselves going in a very rocky, very turbulent fashion, by nursing the next grievance, by breaking off relational bonds with the latest person that they allow to get close and turning that powerful relationship into a repulsive source of power. And I suppose it does give me some idea, a little bit more immediate idea, a little bit more vivid and concrete idea of what it would take for community to actually operate again. And that's a good start. having some idea what your destination looks like, what direction you should be headed to get to your destination. That's progress. Even if it seems as though the road to get from here to there isn't even a road, that it's a trail that has yet to be blazed. And what the first steps are to get that trail under construction, I'm not really sure I can say.